times a meeting. That's my issue.
All right, just be prepared to speak to that. We're going to need to get them, and I guess the community, a correct version ASAP.
All Wight County School Boards in session. Madam Clerk, can you take a roll call, please?
Mr. Cunningham? Mr. Colick?
Present.
Mrs. Perkins? Here. Mr. Wooster?
Present.
And Mr. Marsh?
Here. All right, Mr. Vice Chair, can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please, sir?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve the agenda for open session as presented. And I second it.
A motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Take a vote.
Mr. Colick?
Yes.
Mrs. Perkins? Yes. Mr. Wooster?
Yes.
And Mr. Marsh?
Yes. All right, easy day. So it's February 22nd. Wight County School Board is going to have a work session tonight. We're in Westside Elementary School, where we're preparing students for college, career, and life. Let's get right off to it, Doc. Over to you, sir.
We need to do the pledge.
Oh,
The
yes,
moment
we
of
do.
silence.
I digress. Mr. Vice Chair.
Everyone please stand
All right.
for a moment of silence. And now the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thanks, Madam Clerk, for keeping us honest up here. Now, over to you, Doc Kramer.
Thank you very much, Chairman Marsh. So good evening, Mr. Chairman Marsh, Vice Chairman Wooster, members of the board, and members of our community. I wish to begin by acknowledging and thanking all of those who have worked on preparing the fiscal year 2025 or the FY25 proposed operating budget. I would like to start by recognizing a number of stakeholder groups who are providing input and feedback as we are working to develop the FY25 proposed operating budget. I thank our central office staff members, our principals and school teams. I thank the superintendent advisories, and I thank those members of the community who are providing input via discussions, emails, and the survey that has been shared. I emphasize that this is merely the beginning of the budget development process. Mr. Chair and members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to present the school division's needs in the superintendent's FY25 proposed operating budget. Again, I repeat and state emphatically that this is the superintendent's proposed budget, and again, is merely the first public discussion of FY25 operating budget. The Code of Virginia, section 22.1-92, states that it shall be the duty of each division superintendent to prepare with the approval of the school board and submit to the governing body or bodies appropriate funds for the school division. The estimate of the amount of money deemed to be needed during the next fiscal year for the support of the public schools of the school division. Therefore, this evening I will present the needs of the school division. I do not know the level of funding that will be approved, but it is my responsibility per the state of Virginia, and it is my obligation as the Isle of Wight superintendent to articulate needs the needs to the members of the Isle of Wight School Board as clearly as possible. After my presentation and as we move to the work session, As you can see, members of the school division's leadership team will be prepared to elaborate on any budget requested items that are proposed, again, addressing any questions you, the board, might have. The Isle of Wight Schools FY 2025 proposed operating budget represents the school division's plans for the activities that will take place for the next school year 24-25. The proposed operating budget provides an estimated cost to complete those activities planned for the next fiscal year. School board members, you are certainly aware of this fact, but I note this information from members of the community, that upon review, approval, and/or modification by the school board, a budget is submitted to the Isle of Wight Board of Supervisors for consideration. Funds are only made available once the Board of Supervisors approves the operating budget and appropriates the funds. I'm going to repeat that important point. Upon review, approval, and a modification by the school board, a budget is submitted to the Isle of Wight Board of Supervisors for consideration. Funds are only made available once the Board of Supervisors approves the operating budget and appropriates the funds. Please know that the requested proposed budget items I will share were developed through numerous meetings with students, teachers, principals, and central office staff. I've also had meetings with bus drivers, cafeteria workers, and instructional aides. As superintendent, I've had numerous meetings with community members, various advisory groups consisting of the following: a student advisory group, a parent advisory group, an educator advisory group, a community advisory group, and various other stakeholder groups. My leadership team and I have attempted to include the recommendations and needs from all of these groups. Yet, we have made a concerted effort to develop a budget that meets the essential needs of our schools and the school division, while also developing a budget that is fiscally prudent and practical. I venture to say that this is not an aspirational budget. In other words, we are not asking for resources to fund projects that are on our wish list. Instead, I deem this proposed operating budget to be very fiscally responsible and a budget that will meet the essential needs of our schools. I would be remiss if I failed to articulate the needs of our schools and school division based upon the extensive conversations my leadership team and I have had with our students, our school-based staff, our central office staff, our parents, community members, and individual conversations we've had with each of you, our school board members. Although I will attempt to share our most essential needs in this presentation, I will not endeavor to share every single item. I think that through our ongoing discussions over the next few weeks, we will identify the needs and the requests of the schools and the school division. And as I stated earlier, we will have additional public discussions around the budget in the coming weeks. As we discuss the needs of our school division in the proposed FY25 operating budget, I think it is important for us to remind ourselves of our school division's mission and vision statements, enabling every child to discover their gifts and talents and to ensure that each child is college, career, and life ready. Essentially, we are saying that when our students leave our schools, they should be fully prepared to pursue whatever path they choose. Additionally, the school division spent valuable time developing a well-thought-out strategic plan with multiple stakeholder groups, staff, students, parents, and community members, and identified 4 broad areas: academic excellence, recruitment and retention, family engagement, and organizational effectiveness and efficiency. It is my position that the needs we have identified and the requests we are making will help us improve in the areas as identified by our school division's strategic plan. Prior to sharing our identified needs, per the request of the board, I will provide some state of Virginia comparison data in a few key areas. We've also compiled some of these data points from the Virginia Department of Education, also known as VDOE. As most of you know, the school division is funded through 3 primary sources: the local government, the state government, and the federal government. And I will briefly discuss each as was requested. But before we do that, let's take a look at our community, where we stand relative to the remainder of the state. I will share some of the major data indicators that are often discussed and utilized as it pertains to education funding. Let's first take a look at the local composite index. The composite index determines a school division's ability to pay education costs in the Commonwealth of Virginia. The composite index is calculated by using 3 indicators of a locality's ability to pay: true value of real property, adjusted gross income, and taxable retail sales. The higher the composite index means that a locality has a greater ability to pay. And what you see here from the chart is a comparison with most of the school divisions in their area and in Region 2, which is where Isle of Wight is listed. And what you will notice is that our ability to pay, or our composite index at 0.3704, is slightly higher than most in the area and in the region. The next chart I will share is the per pupil expenditure chart, which shows how much funding we're spending per student in Isle of Wight as compared to other school divisions in the area. You actually see somewhat of an inverse in the order from the previous chart, where we are one of the lowest funded in the area when we calculate federal, state, and local fundings combined. The obvious question is how? I think the answers are varied, and I surmise from the data that there are a few reasons. The Virginia General Assembly directed the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, or the JLARC study, to study the cost of education in Virginia and make an accurate assessment of the cost of the standards of quality. The standards of quality, or SOQ funding formula, is how the General Assembly fulfills its constitutional obligation to seek to establish and maintain a high-quality public school system. That cost is then apportioned between the state and each local government using the local composite index. And it was determined that the Virginia school divisions receive less K-12 funding per student than the 50-state average, the regional average, and 3 of Virginia's 5 bordering states. School divisions in other states receive 14% more per student 14% more per student than school divisions in Virginia on average, after normalizing for differences in cost of labor among states. In other words, the state officials are telling us that the state of Virginia is underfunding our schools. Undoubtedly, the current state SOQ funding model is obsolete and does not meet the needs of our local school divisions. Additionally, it places a greater burden on local county governments in their efforts to fund our schools. I'm pleased that the JLARC study was conducted and anxiously await an overhaul to the current SOQ state funding model. Further complicating funding matters in Isle of Wight is the fact that we have a higher ability to pay, as determined by the local composite index, as I shared earlier, which means that we receive less funding from the state than many of our neighboring school divisions who are less affluent. As a result, many of our neighboring school divisions receive more state and federal funding than does Isle of Wight. As we all recall the massive school closures and changes during the COVID-19 pandemic, all school divisions received federal funding to help students return to school. Those pandemic funds were referred to as the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Funds, or ESSER. Those funds were certainly needed at that time. I would argue that we have not, however, recovered and returned to normal as it relates to our local funding. As you will see from the 2019-2020 chart, with Isle of Wight schools' sources of financial support from the federal, state, and local governments, you will see that prior to the pandemic, our school division received 6.5% of our budget from the federal government, 51.3% from the state, and 42.2% from the local Isle of Wight County government. As you will see from the 2020-2021 chart, which shows the funding sources for our school division, due to the federal ESSER funds, you will notice in red the federal government's portion of our budget increased to 11.4%. The state's portion increased as well to 53.9%, and the local government's portion decreased to 34.7%. The 2021-2022 chart shows a similar pattern of federal government portion increasing even more to 13.9%. The state was 50.5%, and the local was 35.6%. The previous slides show the breakdown of the school division budget as funded by the federal, state, and local governments. This chart shows the percent of Wight County government's budget that we received. As you see, we received 35% of the county's operating budget in 2018-2019 and 2019-2020 prior to the COVID pandemic and the influx of federal funds. As the chart shows, we continue to receive less of a percent of county funding during the years when we received more federal funds. This is not surprising, and these trends are consistent in many, if not in most counties throughout the state and nation. And although these percents appear to be small when we're considering large budgets, these are millions of dollars. Most importantly, what I hope to illustrate are two important points. First, the county funding changes were understandable and justifiable, and no one did anything wrong or malicious. Again, it is understandable that we received less dollars given the large amounts of funds we received from the federal government. Moving forward, it is important to note that we will not have any of the federal ESSER funds in the 2025 fiscal year. In fact, we are required to spend down the remainder of the funds we currently have by this coming fall. And that leads to my second important point. With the influx of the federal ESSER dollars and with state underfunding, the influx of the federal ESSER dollars, and with the state underfunding our school division, it is critically important and urgent that we receive the percent of the county's operating budget that we received prior to the pandemic. And board members, I am sure we will have further discussions around this matter in the coming days and weeks. As it pertains to the budget request for fiscal year 25, I will certainly not endeavor to share all of our requests in my presentations. Those requests have been shared and will be shared via multiple formats to the board and the community. Nonetheless, I will share some of the most significant needs and priorities for our school division. I will start with some of the most urgent needs in the school division. Many of those needs pertain to our facilities and our aging infrastructure. I will start with a dire need for our new buses. We are urgently requesting new buses to replace our aging bus fleet. Currently, the bus fleet consists of 65 general education and special education buses. 19 of the 65 buses, or approximately 1/3 of the buses in Wight County, exceeds the Virginia Department of Education recommended lifespan of 15 years or 300,000 miles. In other words, 1 of 3 buses in our county should not be on the road. This is an urgent matter and has created numerous issues this year with pickup and drop-off for students. As a result, we're requesting funding, one-time funding for 20 buses, 16 general ed, and 4 special ed buses for the fiscal year 25 budget. Next, the current building, aging fleet building, was constructed between 1952 and 1955. The structure is not large enough to accommodate modern school buses. As a result, the facility remains open to the elements during vehicle service and repair, which places fleet service workers in an inferior, unacceptable working environment. With an interior working height of only 12 feet, it is not possible to uplift this structure with modern lifts for inspecting vehicles, which means all repairs and inspections must be performed on the ground. Additionally, the buses do not fit in this structure, which exposes our employees to extreme weather conditions. The high school tracks display notable signs of wear and deterioration across several sections, as you see, indicative of prolonged use and insufficient maintenance over years, again, as you see from the photos. In particular, certain areas of the tracks have endured such extensive usage that underlying asphalt surface is now exposed, posing potential hazards to our student athletes. Both schools need the tracks resurfaced. The tennis courts show signs of deterioration as well, with evident wear and cracking across the surface, as you can see from the photos. Moreover, the lines marking the boundaries of play are gradually fading, diminishing the clarity and accuracy of gameplay. This deterioration compromises the quality of the courts and raises concerns regarding safety and the overall playing experience for our student athletes. Additionally, the light fixtures are currently in need of replacement to ensure proper illumination. Additionally, Smithfield High School bleachers are over 30 years old and have not been upgraded. The ADA, accessible seating at Smithfield High School, needs to be replaced. Our high schools are requesting one-time funding for athletic and band supplies, equipment, and uniforms. Our high schools have not been able to maintain the uniform and equipment update schedule that had been previously set in motion. For multiple school years, the schools have been forced to use the majority of their student-raised athletic funds for security, game officials, and required equipment, for example, helmets. And I think we can all agree that this is a responsibility that should be incurred by the school division. In my meetings with students, principals, my discussions with community members, and during my facilities walks in schools with principals and the operations department, it is very clear that many of our restrooms in several schools need repairs and upgrades. Although I would contend that our facilities, for the most part, are well maintained, many are in need of repairs and upgrades, which extends beyond maintenance. As it pertains to safety and security, we've had numerous discussions regarding safety and security in our school division, and I'm pleased with some of our progress with SROs in all of our schools, SSOs in our high schools, vestibules installed in our schools, and other safety and security enhancements. But I think most of you would agree that there is more that needs to be done. We introduced the weapons detection system technology to the school division last school year. This technology will play a crucial role in helping with the safety of students and staff by detecting and identifying potential threats. Weapons detection is the process of identifying and locating potential threats such as firearms, explosives, and other dangerous weapons that could enter our schools. Although it is not going to single-handedly eliminate threats and is certainly not a cure-all, it will, however, be another layer of safety for our schools. We're also requesting vape detection systems. The proposed plan for vape detection is to utilize a vape detection system that ties into the current security system. The proposed system has been researched thoroughly and has proven to be the best solution for the needs of our schools. Because the system fully integrates with our existing security system, no additional operating systems will be needed. Although many of the items on the list are expensive, the benefit is that many of the items are one-time cost to replace or repair our aging facilities and infrastructure needs. And I hope that after seeing the photos and being updated on the facility needs, we can all agree that our students deserve better. As it pertains to compensation for FY25, we're requesting a 3% salary increase for our educators. The Virginia General Assembly has proposed a 3% salary increase to support our teachers and other educators in the division. The 3% raise is not just a matter of fairness, it's an investment in the future of Wight County Schools. It is no secret that Virginia continues to face significant teacher shortages in public schools. This modest increase in teacher salaries offers a far-reaching benefit that extends beyond the classroom, such as recognition of their dedication and improved retention and recruitment. We will continue to prioritize our educators and ensure that they receive the compensation they deserve. As we've shared with members of the board in our one-on-one meetings, one of the few positions I will seek that is not in the classroom will be support for our finance department. The management of the Wight County Schools' finances is critically important. In light of our constrained resources, our financial challenges, and the multitude of budgetary considerations, it is critical to prioritize transparency, accuracy, and compliance with financial regulations. The decision to hire an accountant in the finance department represents a deliberate investment aimed at enhancing financial stewardship and accountability. We've discussed avoiding single points of failure. This additional position would help us meet that important goal. Health and wellness for staff is a top priority. Having access to comprehensive health coverage not only promotes physical and mental health, but also promotes a healthy learning and work environment. By increasing the budget for the healthcare fund plan, the school board is able to mitigate increasing healthcare costs and avoid passing the additional cost to our employees. To keep health plan premiums affordable for staff and their families, we will need funding in this area. We're also asking for an increase in the budget for retirement payouts. When an IWCS employee retires, we're obligated to pay their remaining leave. Therefore, we are requesting additional funding for the retiree payouts. In the next few sections, you will see that we need additional support in our classrooms due to growth in certain areas. The secondary teaching positions are needed to support student needs and rising class sizes at both high schools. The CTE positions are necessary to expand and improve existing programs and provide additional supervision to ensure student safety in work-based learning environments. Currently, Westside Elementary, Smithfield Middle, and Smithfield High are near capacity with student-to-teacher ratios that are deemed to be appropriate. These ratios, although within compliance, do not allow for the growth we are experiencing on the northern end of the county. Additionally, we're asking for library assistance for our elementary schools. Hardy Elementary, Carrollton Elementary, Carsville Elementary, and Windsor Elementary to provide support management and facilitate Chromebook loans to students as needed. The assistants will handle book checkouts and restock shelves during student visits to the library. Currently, the librarian or media specialist attempts to juggle these numerous tasks, which is overwhelming for one person, as the media specialist teaches resource classes daily and is faced with the constant rotation of classes. Lastly, in the absence of the media specialist, the assistant will step in to teach classes, ensuring continuity in instruction without the need to secure substitute teachers. Also, we're asking for additional funding for our CSEP budget to account for budgetary increases. We're asking for an increase in pay for our IAs. The IAs are currently paid less than a neighboring county, and 10% of our IA positions are currently vacant, with almost 3/4 of those vacancies occurring in the self-contained setting. To continue to expand our CTE programs, we will need additional funding. We've shared that there is student interest in a criminal justice academy. Also, the lack of funding has resulted in no upgrades to existing CTE equipment for programs since fiscal year 21. We're currently behind schedule on replacement of computers for engineering cybersecurity programs as a direct result of inadequate funding. We need an increase for CTE equipment for both purchase of new equipment and the maintenance of current equipment. Needless to say that the commercial grade equipment that is used in many of our CTE programs is very expensive and requires ongoing maintenance and repair for aging CTE equipment. We're also asking for an increase in CTE capital outlay, funding the purchase and installation of a second greenhouse for the agriculture land lab so that the program continues to grow and expand. We all know the amazing work that occurs at our land lab, and I would say that it is one of the jewels of our school division and our community. Thus, we need additional funding to help the program continue to grow. Additionally, we need to increase our technology budget to allow for the purchase of devices and software needed for instruction as costs continue to rise. Board members, as I conclude my presentation, I strongly suggest that the request I've offered in my presentation on behalf of the many voices I represent with this proposed budget, I assert that you are not just spending money, but you are in fact investing taxpayer well-earned dollars on not just our students, staff members, and our schools, but you are investing money in the Isle of Wight community. And what do I mean by that statement? I mean that where you have great communities, where people desire to live and work, you will always find a very good school division. Your quality of living will remain high, and your property values will continue to increase if we maintain very good schools as we work on continuous improvement. But to maintain very good schools, we need the county's investment to ensure that we are properly funded. The recent study from the Weldon Cooper Center at the University of Virginia, which was recently released, states that the Isle of Wight County community is now the 6th fastest growing county in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And the study revealed which counties grew or lost people. What's more interesting is that not only did Isle of Wight County grow, but Isle of Wight County is one of the fastest growing counties in the state over the past few years. Many individuals are choosing to live and work in Isle of Wight County, and they desire to send their children to our schools. If that trend continues, board members and my dear community members, I implore you to invest in our schools, as I'm confident you will. Last year's census update showed Isle of Wight in 7th place among counties and 9th among counties and cities. As we look at the needs we have identified and the requests we are submitting to meet those needs, you will see that the needs exist in critically important areas which are consuming the vast majority of the FY25 proposed operating budget. Therefore, our requests are in those areas to meet that identified need. The numerous facility and infrastructure needs, the 3% raise that is recommended by the General Assembly, our transportation needs, special education needs, career technical education needs as our programs grow, the instructional needs, and the resources for safety and security to ensure that our students and staff are as safe as possible. There's no question, board members, that this investment comes with a cost. Again, we're asking for one-time funding for facility and infrastructure upgrades for essential items such as school buses, new tracks and tennis courts for both high schools, upgrades to student restrooms in many of our schools, and additional security enhancements to mention some of the needs. As you well know, board members, the vast majority of our costs are to pay for the salaries and benefits of our employees. There's not a lot of room for discretionary spending. Thus, we are required to be very prudent as we allocate funds for other needed areas. We all know that the budget process is very fluid. Board members, you may ask us to remove items from the proposed budget, and/or you may ask us to place items in the budget before you, the board, take a final vote. And we are fully prepared to respond to the board's adjustments as instructed. Again, we are developing the budget book for the board's approval. As you look at the budget calendar, this evening, February 22, we have the budget presentation followed by the first work session. On March 7th, we will provide the public an opportunity to comment through the public hearing process, followed by a second work session. At the March 14th monthly board meeting, we're asking that the board take a vote on the proposed FY25 budget unless there is need for an additional work session. And we can certainly add additional work sessions as requested or required by the board before the board takes a final vote. Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman Marsh, Vice Chair Wooster, and members of the board. At this time, I will ask our leadership team, I was going to say move to the table and prepare for questions. You're already here, along with other members and other staff, to respond to any questions the board might have for our FY25 proposed operating budget. Thank you again, and we look forward to the work session and welcome your questions, Mr. Chair, at this time.
Thanks, Dr. Kramer. I think I'm going to let the fellow board members start off here, but before we do, just to kind of keep everybody up to speed, so fellow board members and staff and whoever else is listening out there. So last week, Thursday, Dr. Kramer and I attended the Board of Supervisors meeting, and we presented the audit findings and corrective action plans. And as we closed that discussion, we left there with a verbal agreement that the school board and members of the Board of Supervisors would work. As soon as this was presented to the whole board, we'd start having some conversations with the Board of Supervisors. So moving forward, Mr. Colick and whoever else wants to be a part of that, we'll sort it out. Everybody gets a voice in this, but the point is we're going to field some questions and have some robust discussions and share some opinions and so on and so forth. But between tomorrow and March 7th, it's going to be on the school board member to work with the county supervisors and get some realistic expectations on what can and can't be done, rather than just throwing stuff up against the wall to see if it sticks. So, and then one last little tidbit, I think on the slide, Dr. Kramer, it says March 7th, tentative 5 p.m. I believe we've set that at 6 p.m. So
That is correct.
admin change there.
Thank you.
And on that, I'll open it up to the board here.
Mr. Chair, I've got a question for you. Do we want to go in any particular order? Do we want to just shotgun questions out there? How do you perceive us doing this?
It's a good question. So are we going to go through the quad slides as well?
We have the quad slides loaded, and staff is prepared to go through the quad.
So unless
Charts.
there's any objection, I think we'll take a few minutes to float some ideas and comments off this, and then when we're satisfied, then we'll roll into the specifics of the quad slide. No doubt a lot of it will bleed over. But if there's any specific comments on Dr. Kramer's presentation, then we'll start with that.
I've just got a couple questions that'll probably fall into the quad slide, so maybe I'll make just a couple comments. Since 2018, our cost of salaries in Wight County School Division have increased by about 55%, but our facilities have not maintained as they should have been, as Dr. Kramer clearly articulated. But when we consider it inflation, the real increase has been on average about $2 million a year. Okay, so we've got to keep that in the back of our minds when we're saying this is how much we're spending. We've got to adjust that for inflation. This year, and I think I've made this clear all year, I'm only going to be supporting costs incurred for direct instruction, pay raises, professional education and training of our staff, maintenance of our buildings, facilities, and grounds. And that's primarily what I'm looking at, from my perspective, supporting. So most of my questions would be, related to that. And I think I'll have several other questions that may not seem to be directly related to what's being asked, but they will directly be related to us spending money throughout the year. So, but I think most of my questions are going to be more appropriate when we're going through this quad slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Colick. Anyone else? Not yet?
I've got several questions, but that's all.
For the quad slides. I'll make a couple comments. So we've already got the slide. The quad. Can we go back to the other brief? Is that doable there? Composite index slide, if you would, please. So So just a couple comments, and Doc Kramer, you help me talk through this if you don't mind,
Absolutely.
sir. So I think this is important for the public watching, because a lot of this is just, at least for me, for a while, was hard to wrap my head around. And you articulated what the composite index is. How did you pick these schools on the left-hand side?
Great question, sir. These are schools that are in our area, and these are schools that are in Region 2. And we are in Region 2. So the state lists counties geographically in regions. I think there are 8 total. Staff can correct me if I'm wrong. And these are Region 2 school divisions, with the exception of Gloucester. But we included Gloucester because demographically and in terms of our size, we often compare ourselves to Gloucester for those reasons. But the remainder of the schools are Region 2, with the exception of the schools that are on the Eastern Shore. I think there are 2 that we did not include, Northampton, because again, they're on the Eastern Shore, but the remainder of the schools are Region 2 schools, except Gloucester again.
And which one do you think closely resembles Isle of Wight?
Again, I would say Gloucester, correct, staff. Please, guys, chime in. Help me out here.
Yeah, we typically compare ourselves to Gloucester because of the size of the number of students in the division and the composite index. We're very closely aligned with them.
Okay. What about Surrey? Right up the road.
Surrey is actually, it's rather ironic. They're on the line, and they're not in Region 2. Ironically, Surrey has a very high composite index, I think because of their nuclear power plant. Surrey is actually maxed out. So the composite index ranges from 0 to 1.0, and the higher you are, again, the state factors that you have a greater ability to pay. I think Surrey, if I'm correct, is 0.8. They're maxed out. So the max that the state allows you to go is 0.8. So Surrey's actually maxed out. So they would be significantly higher than us. But they don't really compare because they're significantly smaller than us in terms of their student size. So we usually don't compare ourselves to Gloucester, to Surrey, and again, they're not in Region 2.
And just to add, there are 3 schools in Surrey, less than 1,000 students, so it's hard to compare them to us.
Right. Thank you. So we flipped the side to the per pupil expenditure, and just to be clear, Isle of Wight spends $13,110 per pupil. That's total funds. That's not federal, state, or county. That's all of it combined.
That is correct.
Okay. And then the bar graph or the line graph you have, total general fund budget.
Which slide?
That one right there.
Yes.
With Cooper. Yep.
And that shows, sorry.
So this tells a lot. And I like the pie graphs, but I think if you could, sir, and entertain my OCD-ness here, if you could incorporate the pie charts into this. In other words, so if you could draw a line that showed state funds and federal funds so that we can compare those lines, I think it'd be a little bit easier to wrap the head around.
Sure, and I think what's different, and Ms. Loud has been helping me, so come forward if need be. What's different here from the pie charts, the pie chart showed the county's budget as the makeup for the county's budget, federal, state, local. This shows our portion of the county's budget.
Got it.
Right? So it's a different set of numbers here. So this is showing that we were in Isle of Wight County's budget 35% earlier, prior to the pandemic. During the pandemic, again, it's clear. You can see that drop-off where our percentage is lower than it was. And again, it's pretty clear looking at the data. It aligns perfectly with the ESSER funds. When we received more federal funds, we were using fewer local dollars. So it's pretty clear as to why that happened. Again, I would contend that now with those federal funds all but gone, we will need a larger share, again, of the county's operating budget because, again, those millions and millions of dollars that we were receiving, those dollars are no more.
Thanks, Doc. Yeah, so you're always more polished than I am. So layman's terms is 19, 20, 21, we were inundated with COVID money, trying to figure out how to spend it.
Well, I wasn't here, but I
You
would
weren't
say,
here, but
having been in education, every school
Right.
division, district system in America was awash in federal funds, and there were fewer needs. Because remember, for a large portion of that time, schools were in session, so you weren't paying for fuel, you weren't paying for electricity, food. So your costs went down, yet you had all of these dollars. Again, we have those dollars are no longer available, and our needs, I would venture to say, aren't where they were. They probably exceeded because of the issues we're dealing with behavior, learning loss, et cetera. And I would venture to say staff would agree with me. I would hope that staff would agree with
Mr.
me.
Chair,
Yes, sir.
if I could piggyback on your question, I think that's really important where you have that broken down by percentage, Dr. Kramer. What I would also like to see, however, is the actual amounts of money during each one of those years from the state, from federal, and from the county, so that we can see the true picture right across the board. I think that will help people fully understand.
It's a great question, Chair Collick, and former Chair Collick, board member Collick, I apologize. Great question. In fact, sort of did the math myself. We can reveal that, and I can make certain that for our next work session, we have the math to be able to display what those differences are. Great question, absolutely.
Thanks, Mr. Collins.
Thank you.
We're tracking on the same.
Absolutely.
bandwidth
Staff,
there.
let's please notate that so that we can provide the actual dollar amount. Thank you for that.
And I think the average person that's just looking at the bottom dollar, the total budget, if you looked year over year, the total budget, as Mr. Cock alluded to, I think we'll see that it steadily increased. Inflation rates.
That's right.
There were various contributing factors. So there's the bottom line, the total funds received, but there's also where it came from. So there's a lot of pieces that. So, you have anything?
Do we have the number for this year?
Would you repeat your question, Mrs. Perkins?
On that slide, do we have the number for this school year's budget?
And what year is that's last year's 22, 23. We actually do, and I think, and please correct me, I think we're at 31.8%, just a bit under 32%. So we did go up, as I recall, from last year. But slightly. We're still not back to the 35%, which is where we were. But it's slightly higher than the 22, 23 year in terms of the percentage.
One thing that I would argue, though, when we're looking at these percentages, now the county has grown over the last decade, as you mentioned earlier. Over the last 5 years, though, our school population has not. So there's going to be an argument from the other agencies, I guess we would call them, in the county to increase their budgets as well, because, you know, the sheriff's department, you know, has more people they have to respond to. The fire departments, you know, have more localities to respond to. So we've got to kind of keep that in the back of our minds as well, that we are competing for dollars. Nothing's guaranteed. So the argument very well has to be there above and beyond this is what we've received in the past.
Absolutely.
All right. Pending any other comments, I say we just roll into the individual quad slides.
Go ahead, Ms. Lau.
Is it on? No.
Nope.
Eric?
Test.
Thank you. Mr. Collick, to your comment, so in 1819, our spring ADM, our average daily membership, was 5402. And in 22-23, our ADM, our spring ADM was 5460. So our enrollment has increased some.
Oh, I would agree, but very negligibly, when we're looking at the number of people that came into the
Agreed.
county.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It's not as high as the growth for the county.
And if I may add, that's not unique, if I may, Mr. Chair, that's not unique to us. I think across the state, across the region, across the country, we find that more students are being homeschooled, many students are going to independent schools. So many schools, colleges, and universities have actually not rebounded since the pandemic. But to your point, yes, your point is well taken. But I just wanted to state that for the public and others who are watching, that's not an Isle of Wight County issue. That's a national issue, if you will.
Absolutely.
All right, we can go ahead and begin. Now we're going to start off. Yeah, absolutely. All right. The first slide that you will see is the grant writer, and some of my colleagues can actually help me out a little bit with this. And we wanted to make sure that we put this out. The main focus here is that members of the school board and members of the community, we all recognize the importance of grants, seeking grants, federal grants, state grants, and federal government grants, things to alleviate the local tax burden. With this position of grant writer, it came up maybe 3 or 4 months ago, several times, and now we want to make sure that we pushed it in the budget so that we can address this issue. This will be an increased cost of $50,000, and just to further this situation, IWCS does not have staffing to consistently seek these additional grant funding. It would be additional duties and things of that nature. So we're seeking a position that is totally outside for $50,000.
And Dr. Coleman, would this be full-time or part-time?
This would be a part-time
Part-time.
position.
Thank you.
Have we entertained the idea or the option of hiring a contractor to do this? Is that an option?
That has been discussed also, contractor. That's why I went with a flat $50,000. That has been discussed.
Okay. Any other comments on this?
No, I definitely support this. I would rather not see a contractor do this, ownership.
Right.
If we've got one of our employees doing this and they're getting lots of grant for us, then we'd have the ability to increase the pay a little bit.
Absolutely.
Or if they're not able to do anything, to remove the position, whereas if we have a contractor, we're in a contract. And whether or not we get the grants, we'd be paying the money, at least for the initial part of the contract.
Right, great
So,
point.
yeah, I'm tracking 100% part-time position. Yeah, I
Absolutely.
definitely support that.
How do we do this now? How do we handle a grant writing process? Who does it? How's that?
It's,
You mean currently who
Yes,
does
sir.
this?
Yes.
okay.
Well,
Go right here.
well, it depends. This position that we're talking about is not for our title grants, the federal grants. This would be to secure grants that are offered not through a federal program necessarily. There are a lot of grants out there, and this would be, that position would write grants to try to obtain grants for other various things, but not title. I know you hear us talk about title grants. It's not for the title grant position.
If I may, Ms. Getz, I was at a function, and I don't remember which one, but it was just in the last month, where I had talked to a board member from another district, wasn't around here, I think it was out in the western part of the state, and they had actually got a grant, they have a grant writer, and they were able to get a grant for new sports equipment, big grants.
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
so you can get them for virtually anything.
Yes. And that's a great example, Mr. Colick. I was trying to make the difference between that new position and then our current position that we have who does all of our title grants. So what you said is perfect.
Thank you.
I don't know what I don't know. So is it possible or an option to hire someone in this position, and let's just say if you were to bring in X number of grants, you get your pay is commensurate with the revenue you generate for the schools?
So you're kind of talking about a commission-based
Yes.
employee. We don't have any other commission.
I don't know if your mic is on him.
It is.
Okay.
We don't have any other commission-based employees in our division. It's something we could definitely explore. I'm assuming, based on the type of grants, they wouldn't be able to use the grant funds that they're bringing in order to pay them. So we would have to then be prepared with a flexible budget. And that potentially could get concerning if, they brought in millions of dollars. That would be wonderful. But that would then mean that we would have to make up for that salary on the local side, because they can't. In most budgets, they would not allow you to write in the person's salary for writing the budget to pay them back.
Mr. Chair, if I might,
Yes.
what would the possibility of having some type of award program that, somebody's writing grants, and this could be across the school division, to give awards out?
Do you mean like if we, instead of hiring a particular position, if another employee wrote grants?
No.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm just saying in general, say for this position, it could be used across the division for anything,
Okay.
not just grants. But if we had some type of award program, person writes grants, 4 grants come in, $2.5 million, well, let's give them an award.
Certainly.
Can we give them an on-the-spot award with $2,500 or something like that?
Yeah.
Not 10%.
Right. So we do offer supplemental contracts or supplemental amounts of funds. There's times where you all approve on the personnel report for us to pay extra funds for someone who completes a certain training. So you could certainly define that and say that we're going to offer X amount, kind of like we did with the referral bonuses last year. Employees were paid a lump sum that you all approved the personnel report. We would just need to know what that amount you would want to award them. It would be best with our kind of budget to be able to set an amount and decide what a limited pot would be, so that when that runs out, the funds are no longer available. Just because, unlike corporations who do commission-based, they have a product, they have a bottom line that fluctuates based on the revenue that someone produces. Ours would not be that.
Right. Okay.
Mr. Chair. I've got 2 quick questions for you on the grant writing position. This position, will whoever fills that be responsible for obtaining the grants as well as making sure that the grants are reimbursed? That's the first part of my question.
So typically in this type of grant writing, there isn't a reimbursement. Those usually are the ones coming from the state. Typically, like for example, you might have heard of the OBC grant. That's a really popular one in our area. You write a plan for what you're going to use it for, and then they give you the money. And typically they'll ask you to do some kind of write-up to explain that you followed through on that and that you spent the funds appropriately, knowing that if you didn't, they would expect those funds back. But they give, typically in this kind of grant writing, it's different from your title and your federal grants and state grants, because they're giving you the funds without having to show proof of spending first.
Okay, so we get those up front.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, there's so many grants right now.
Oh, yes. Yeah, totally. And they're
I'm
totally
just trying my
different
best
from
to
each
keep
other.
track of
Yeah.
Yes.
The second part of my question, the person that would be in this position, is this person solely dedicated to, obtaining grants? Or would this person be pulled to different locations, doing different duties, multiple duties per se?
So the job description that we wrote initially for this position whenever, I can't really remember the first time we proposed it, but whenever that was, it was solely about grants. All of our job descriptions say as other duties as assigned. So if there were ever to be a need that we felt like closely aligned with that, that would be the superintendent's discretion to assign additional duties if needed within the contracted hours of that person's employment. But the job description that we developed and drafted for that was related to just grants.
Okay. The reason I ask that is I just don't want to see, a filled position for grant writer's position lacking for being pulled for various other duties. So, Dr. Kramer, would you do that?
Totally agree with you, Vice Chair Wooster. But I would say, we're a smaller division, and there are times when we all wear many hats, including superintendent. So just as we pulled, the team to actually assist with the reimbursements, certainly there are times when we all assist in different ways. But I would absolutely agree with you that if approved, the primary responsibility of this person would absolutely be seeking grants, whether those are state, local, private grants from foundations, et cetera. And while I have the mic, one example, the Bill and Melinda Gates, $1 billion grants are out there, the Wallace Foundation. There are a number of grants out there that we currently are not seeking that this position would be able to go out and try to find. So those are some of the other and there are thousands of grants out there that we are not applying for just because we don't have the manpower to do that, or the woman power as well.
All right, very good. All right, next one. Oh, go ahead.
How much is the guarantee, I guess, that this position is going to pay for itself? And that we're not just getting another, so there's no guarantees, and there's nobody in this school division with all the employees we have already that can do this work, this job?
So there is no guarantee, but I know that in speaking about this initially, the idea behind it was that if the person does not bring in more than what their salary is worth, that would be a position that we would consider not continuing with. I mean, it would not be advantageous of us to do that after giving the opportunity and the supports needed in order to be successful. And so there are employees, so for example, like our teachers wrote grants for themselves in their classrooms to get from the Educational Foundation, which we're very thankful for. But there is no one individual who can take on that duty
Of multiple grants.
of multiple grants. Occasionally, you might, like for last year, I know Nurse Roddy wrote grants for her health clinic. But in doing so, you're having to take time away from your role and to give that to that grant writing in order to bring in more funds to support your program. And those are for like very specific grants. When you're talking about division-wide initiatives, there is no one at the division level that is staffed that has time in their daily workload to do that.
Currently, periodically, we do, pull staff who are writing grants that are very specific. I think Nurse Roddy is an example of that, who are seeking grants, but to do this widespread, that would take someone who does not have other responsibilities. And I think Vice Chair Wooster's question, we make certain that people are focusing on their primary responsibilities. We don't have anyone who can go out and seek a large number of grants as their primary responsibility. And to answer your question, if we hire for this position and the person isn't bringing in more than they're making, this is one of those positions that is truly not black and not very gray. This is black or white. If you're making $50,000 a year and you're bringing in less than that, you're not carrying your weight. Working in other divisions, you can receive millions and millions of dollars of grants from foundations and private entities, but you do need someone to work on those grants. It can take you days and days and days, if not weeks, to submit a grant. In fact, we were a part of seeking the state's grant for lab schools in partnership with Camp Community College. And just as partners, it took staff, and Dr. Kale is there and was our representative, along with other staff members working with them. It took all of us, it took them days and days, if not weeks. And fortunately, we received the planning grant. But if we are fortunate to receive the actual grant for the lab school, that's going to be millions of dollars. That's going to benefit our students. And I think that's one example where we don't have the personnel to go out and do that. Dr. Kale doesn't have the ability to do that, given all of her other responsibilities. And such would be the case with our other employees as well.
All right, moving right along.
Mr. Chair, did you want to go through every slide, or do we want to open it up for
I
questions?
think we'll be here all night
Uh-huh.
if we go through every slide.
Whatever works best for you, the
Yeah,
board.
so we're all looking at the same package here. I say we just kind of up here, we'll start at the front and go back, and if someone has a question, we'll just go from there. It's a lot.
I have a question about the criminal justice, if anybody.
Go for it, ma'am.
What is the job market for that?
I'm going to have Dr. Kale.
So I didn't, is this on? Can you hear me?
Bring it close.
Very, very close.
Yeah, pull the mic a little closer,
Okay.
thank you.
Real close.
Sorry, got my teacher voice here. I actually did the applications for the courses. We have to make application to the state just a few weeks ago. And we are looking at about 14% job growth in that particular area. I would also note, though, that we have 583 students who are interested in careers in the public or legal services sector, and that includes 33 game wardens, 88 police officers, 3 probation officers, 153 lawyers, and 10 paralegals. So we have a job market that is looking to hire these students, and we have student interest.
And this curriculum covers pretty much that range.
Yes, actually, I haven't brought the curriculum with me for anybody who was interested in it for both Criminal Justice 1 and Criminal Justice 2. Ms. Street and I actually sat with some representatives from the Sheriff's Department a couple weeks ago to look at the specific curriculum and the certifications that they would get as part of that CTE pathway to make sure that it was something that would prepare students for entry into the police academy that would make them a highly competitive applicant.
Thank you.
If you had this position filled for the start of the next school year, what else do you need to make this course happen? Facilities, any other personnel? Throw it on the table.
A teacher and some curriculum resources, which I'm working with the Sheriff's Department to identify exactly what those are. I've never actually done fingerprinting, so I don't know what's required. But to just help, they would work with us to see exactly what those materials are for the course. We have the curriculum itself, so just any curriculum materials and a person.
Facility?
We have a space.
What about facilities?
We would use a classroom at Smithfield High School.
So you have existing classroom that you
Yes,
could
sir.
use. So really, you just need the person.
I just need a person.
And if I may add, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, please, please.
Dr. Kale alluded to this. We have been working closely with Sheriff Clark and the deputies. So this is a position that they would like us to look at. More importantly, we have student interest as well. So having an industry partner with the sheriff's office, deputies who are in conversation with us regarding this, and having student interest is important.
Dr. Kale,
Yes, sir.
so how do we determine if one of our CTE programs is successful?
So I get a report from the state every year that tells me how my students are performing comparatively to other students in the state. We also look at the number of earned credentials and the rate of students that go into that job market after graduation. So there's a survey that's conducted a year later to assess how students are doing.
Enrollment.
Okay, so
And course enrollment, obviously.
certainly. So we do have a couple areas where that I've got some concerns with. In 2021, 2022 school years, both of those, we had, looks like 4 people in 2021 and 2 people in 2022 took the manufacturing specialist certification. And the first year, 2 out of the 4 passed. The second year, 2 out of the 2 passed. Last year, we had 16 students take it with 3 passing.
It is a very, very difficult assessment, and students have to pass multiple pieces of the assessment in order to be successful.
So how do we consider that as a successful program is my question.
I mean, we're looking at, one, you have increased enrollment there, so more students are interested. Two, we also have to go in and provide professional learning to those staff members, which we have done, to ensure that they are more successful going forward. And then three, we have to evaluate the resources we are using to assess and deliver the curriculum to begin with, to make sure that what the teacher is teaching is aligned. When I hear results like that, it tells me that what the teacher was teaching and what the test was testing were not the same thing.
Yeah, that number, definitely concerns me, and that's why I have that question. Criminal justice, as I mentioned last week, that's what my associates was in, and that's why I joined the military, to go into that. I'm just, I'm still not sold on that at the high school level. That's just an area, that I'm not sold at. Got all the respect in the world for law enforcement officers, but that's...
Is there something specific about it that you are not sold on, as you say? I'm not...
There's nothing that sells me on it. There is absolutely nothing that I've heard, that I've been able to find, that tells me, hey, this is a good investment for our county, and it's more of a gut feeling. I'm gonna admit that, and we've got limited funds, and without a lot more information, that's one that I just can't support.
I would just like to point out that when we categorized our student career interest surveys,
right.
Public and legal services were among the top 5 choices of our students. So when you consider the number of students that are included in that survey, 600 students are telling us that's their top career choice.
If we could, I'd like to look at the curriculum, Dr. Kell, at a later date. Not today. Maybe I'll get a copy of it while I'm recovering, because I just can't wrap my head around how we can teach that in high school, to be completely honest with you. The building trades, I'm good with that. The patient care technician instructor, absolutely, we need that. Welding, I know we need that. Cosmetology, I get it. That's when I just, it's just hard for me to wrap my head around it, and I've got somewhat a background, although very dated. So I'm just, not sure.
I gave Ms. Whitlow a copy of the Criminal Justice 1 and the Criminal Justice 2 modules.
Okay.
Take a look, and then if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them around what the program goals would be,
Perfect.
what we're actually trying to prepare students to do to enter that field.
As you know, I want to give the students what they want, but, we've also got to weigh it against everything else, and, in my gut, I've got to be sold on it too, okay? So, Ms. Whitlow, if I could get a copy of that, whenever you have time to make copies, because I'm going to write all over it. Okay. All right. That's it on that subject, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Mr. Wooster?
Mr. Chair, if I can make a suggestion, when going through this, I recommend going budget item by budget item, listing the title of each one if anyone has a question on it. If not, then we just keep moving on. Otherwise, we will be here all night.
Slide by slide, yeah.
100%, Mr. Wooster.
Yeah.
Director of Student Services. Anybody have comment on that position?
I have a question.
Shoot.
Looking at the Director of Student Services and the responsibilities that are included, I've got a question pertaining to disciplinary hearings. It was my understanding that that was one of the main reasons for having a Dean of Students, for handling disciplinary hearings. Also, you've got included in responsibilities nurses, athletics, tuition students, out-of-zone, homebound, homeschool, Title IX. That is a lot of roles and responsibilities for one person. So, honestly, I've got several questions. Number one, is it truly needed, since we already have a position that handles disciplinary hearings? Under nurses, we do have a nursing supervisor. For athletics, tuition students, it just seems like a wide range of various topics, skills, and knowledge for one person. So can I get you to elaborate on that for me?
Sure, absolutely. So this is a position that I want to first say is very common in school divisions. In fact, it's pretty unusual that we don't have the position. We did have it for many, many, many years. About 9-10 years ago, the position was eliminated and the duties were divided up among a number of people. These were the duties that that person had, except for the Title IX piece, at that time. And these are all the duties that were divided up among other people. The disciplinary hearings, what we speak about, when administrators or the deans suspend a student for 10 days with a recommendation for long-term suspension, we have to give the parents the right to have a hearing before a hearing officer. These are the hearings that I am referring to. They are done at central office. And currently, Dr. Stith Johnson, our director of elementary, she is the hearing officer for our school division. It is really not part of her job per se. She's an elementary director, but she does the hearings, which are for secondary schools. So this would bring that to another person where it would make more sense. So someone who is responsible for student services, it's all the services that we talked about. It's the disciplinary piece, nurses, they would be responsible for the nurse supervisor reporting to that person. Right now, she reports to Dr. Coleman, which again, that's operations, so it kind of falls into that gray area where it's not instruction, it's not truly operations, it is student services. Athletics, right now, they fall under Dr. Kale, which, yes, that does work, but if you had someone who really oversaw that piece of it, it would be better. Tuition students, out-of-zone students, I do those. Homebound students are done by our special education department. Homeschool is Colleen Loud, who's Director of Assessment and Accountability. So where these people fall, these duties fall, they don't make logical sense. They are just put in a spot because we didn't have anywhere else to put them. Laura Sullivan, and I'm going to have her talk about her duties as the Title IX coordinator, has nothing to do with HR. So I'm going to let her speak on that.
So yes, I'm Title IX coordinator, and so that part of the job is dealing with sexual harassment or sexual assault. And in several divisions, a Title IX coordinator might be designated as HR when it comes to employees. If there is sexual assault, if an employee is accused of or reports as a victim of. However, in our division, I also take care of that for our students, which is really outside of the realm of human resources when it comes to employees. And it is time consuming. Title IX is one of those things that is legal. There comes a lot of ramifications of not following that policy. And when we have an open case, 2 days of my 5-day week can completely be isolated to Title IX. In that regard, I have to rely on my department that is small given the number of employees that we have to handle those HR responsibilities. And so it's not really fair to our employees to have to wait on responses from us because we are completing that duty really outside of that realm. So those are those auxiliary duties, really putting all of those together into one person who can coordinate between operations and instruction to have that collaborative approach.
And I would like to add one more thing. If you think about over the last 9 years, the needs have increased. Everywhere you look, the needs have increased. And just for one example, our number of homeschooled students, when Ms. Loud started, it might have been 50 students, and it's close to 300 now. So that is processing all of those applications that come in. So everything has increased. And so for the people who are responsible for those things, that really does hinder their main job duty. So we would like to pull it back to one person being responsible. And let me say this too. This is not about, we're just trying to free up work of central office folks. because I know it could appear that way. It truly is a request about being able to provide a better quality of services for our students.
Okay. Speaking just for myself, I don't know what anyone else's opinion is. With the nurses added under this position of Director of Student Services, me personally, I would feel much better if there was a nursing director with medical background that could oversee the school nurses program within the schools.
Well, our nurse supervisor is the person who oversees the school nurses. That nurse supervisor has to have a supervisor. So
Right.
this person would simply report to that person. But the medical things happening in the building, they go to Nurse Roddy, our supervisor. She handles all of those things.
Right, I understand that. But any person above her, at least in my opinion, should have a medical background and knowledge superior to the nursing supervisor if that's who they're going to supervise.
And I think in larger divisions, absolutely. But I'll give you some examples. Like our school counselors, we don't have a school counselor who oversees them. Our school psychologists, we don't have a school psych who oversees them. So we have a lot of positions where they are supervised by someone who doesn't necessarily have expertise in that area.
Can I also just add that there are times when some of these job tasks overlap. So, for example, I oversee athletics, but Nurse Roddy oversees school nurses. But we have to come together when it comes to things like the Division Concussion Committee and looking at athletic trainers and those sorts of things. So there's a lot of places where these student services roles kind of intermingle. And when you have lots and lots of people trying to do various parts of one larger job, it tends to muddy the water a bit. And that's part of the reason that something like this position would help us to streamline and give those better services to our students.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Sir?
Ladies, I'm looking at the statistics from the National Center for Education Statistics, and this is from last year. So last year we had 393.75, not sure how you get that, teachers. We also have 384.3 other staff members. So half of the employees of Isle of Wight Schools basically don't work in the classroom directly. When I came on the board in 2022, we were told, hey, these are the positions we need. These are the administrators we need. We've got to have them. Last year, we were told the same thing. This year, every year, we seem to be told that. We have 777 employees in our school district of 5,600 students. Last year, 5,627. At what point are we going to say we have enough employees? What time are we going to look inward and say, okay, we can consolidate some of the duties. Some of the duties may not have to be done anymore. But ladies, I think we have the largest staff that we're going to have, except for a couple minor changes, in my opinion. I can't see how we've done so long without this, and all of a sudden, we absolutely have to have it. Okay? I would like to see us buckle down on discipline, because that seems to be an issue that is burning the teachers out. That seems to be the number one issue when I talk to teachers, is student discipline, followed by the lack of parental disciplining their child. And a few of them have mentioned not getting the support they felt they needed from their immediate supervisor when they're disciplining students. So I think we need to focus on some of that before we get into another disciplinary I don't know. I think every year I've come up now, this is the third time, like I said, and we just have to have these positions. We just have to have these positions. And this year, I'm not going there. Okay.
So those numbers are not accurate. I'm not sure what website they're off, but I'm happy to provide for you the numbers in comparison.
If you would,
Yeah,
yes.
certainly.
I would appreciate that.
I can do that for you.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to the positions, a lot of times it's about reallocations of duties and increased expectations of what the product is. So you mentioned in terms of, maybe we're not going to give those services. Well, then we need to talk about what services we're going to eliminate. And then that would lead to what staffing then would not be considered. But the numbers off of the website are not correct.
Okay. That's supposedly an organization that gathers this from public records, so, but yeah, if I could get that correct information from you, Mrs. Sullivan, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And this is not the first time that this position has been requested. It's been requested before a number of years for me. Sometimes it doesn't quite even make it this far. I just recognize in my department, this is an extreme weakness that we had. And even when Dr. Kramer had an outside, they did like an audit of our central office, this was also a weakness that they saw, was how we were trying to provide these services, but with so many people trying to provide them. So, but I understand and respect your opinion. I've got to fight for what I feel like, we really need.
Oh, I completely understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll offer this as we carry on here. I think we all know that there's a lot more ask than we're going to be able to provide.
Absolutely.
And there's no doubt that you're all very passionate about what you do respectively. So
Yes.
just asking questions, getting it out there. I'll put you on the spot, Dr. Kramer. You'll love this one. If I told you had $150,000 and you had to pick between a director of student services or a new criminal justice CTE instructor, what would you pick?
So you're going to ask me to pick between my favorite child?
Yep.
I can't. I would need to have a discussion. We'll get to that point, no question, where we have to prioritize.
Okay.
But I think to do that in the absence of having a larger conversation would probably not be appropriate for me to. Okay. I respect the question. I appreciate it. But
more to follow.
Absolutely. I think once we get to that place of having to make those tough decisions, and as you stated, totally adequately and fairly, as we have conversations with our appropriating body and have to make some cuts, we'll certainly get to that space, but I would like to be able to look at, because hopefully it's not just an option between those two.
I
totally get
it at you.
I appreciate the
Throwing
question.
It at you. Maybe we'll lighten it up a little bit. All right, so let's move right along. I think you already hit on the 3 library assistants. Is there any comment or question about that? All right, math interventionist at Westside Elementary School. Comments, questions on that?
Well, since I just hit you really hard, Mrs. Getz.
That's okay. I'm ready,
on
Mr.
that,
Collett. Let's
the
go.
math interventionalist, I am 100% behind that. If our math scores show that we need that, that's an area that we need. It's directly impacting the students. I'm 100% behind you on that.
Yes, I mean, the results that we're seeing at our schools that have them are actually incredible. Yeah. It's very promising, and it goes to show that when you have expert teachers, experts in their field, working with students, in small groups, very small groups, the growth does happen, because we are seeing it. I just want Westside to have that, so thank you for supporting
Absolutely.
that.
So in my view, these benefit the public as much as they do the board. If you could add an asterisk on there somewhere that what has the math interventionist done at the other schools? You know what I'm saying? What's the benefit of having one? We've said that the risk of no action is that we have a challenge of mitigating student learning.
They're increasing their growth, their math knowledge. It has greatly increased.
That's what I want to capture. Mm-hmm. This is what we're going to do with this.
Okay.
And I think that's easy to sell to the public If we're going to hire a person to come in and help these children do better at math,
Yes.
that's an easy sell. Much easier than some of the other ones.
I understand.
It's,
I've just got one quick question for you. It states that the West Side's math data indicates the students could benefit greatly from the position. Do you right now know what the current student results and trending is, and are they proficient at grade level due to that position?
Are you asking at other schools?
At West Side.
Okay, so at West Side, I mean, we just completed some of our mid-year data, and I mean, we have a number of students, 80-some students who are in need of urgent intervention, and approximately another 80 students who need intervention. So, I mean, you're talking right off the bat, I've got 160 students at West Side I could put in math intervention today.
Okay. So at other schools where it says you're seeing very good results,
Yes.
are those students proficient at grade level now
They're
or
either,
progressing to that?
yes, yes. And we're seeing like dramatic growth where they have achieved more growth in a half a year than they achieved all of last year. That's the kind of growth we're seeing.
Okay.
And it's a number of students, and it's in 3 of our schools. So really seeing promising results. And again, we have expert teachers teaching the math in small groups, hands-on.
How many students can a teacher, a math interventionist, handle in a given week?
Well, they have, each day we're running about probably between 50 and 70 students, and typically they go either every day or every other day.
So is one enough?
Well, maybe not. One's better than none. But if you're offering up, yes, I'll take 2.
Well, if it's needed, I'd like to see it put in there.
Okay.
You know.
Okay, let me crunch the numbers a little bit more.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely, sure.
all right, moving right along. Secondary positions. High school history teacher, high school PE teacher, Windsor High School, 4 blocks. Comments, questions? My
Question.
understanding that these are needed.
Yes. What's the appropriate number of high school students in each of these classes, particularly history, math, science, those types of classes, and also PE separately?
I mean, we like to keep our secondary classes around 25, but at Smithfield, honestly, it is closer typically to upper 20s to 30 in a lot of classes. That's not ideal. We would prefer it to be closer to 25 in high school. And so these are driven by numbers in classes.
Okay. If you could do me a favor and check the numbers at Smithfield High again for history, because in October we were briefed that it was 22 students in the history classes. So if you could just double check that for me.
Yeah, and let me-
I understand you're looking at next year's
We are.
students coming in.
And we're also looking at, like for right now, Smithfield, one of their issues is their elective numbers are very high. So we are looking at what other offerings could we provide that could decrease some of those elective numbers. So for example, if we could offer psychology, sociology, those are classes that students would take instead of maybe an art class or something like that. And so that would thereby decrease the numbers. So we're looking at a variety of things to try and do that.
Okay, so potentially other electives in
Correct.
addition to what we have. Okay.
Correct.
From the numbers, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we already touched on the CTE a bit.
Yeah, just hang out.
Special education,
Oh, okay.
any comments?
Give me a minute. Let me look.
Slide 10.
Slide 10. That is.
While he's looking for that, across the board, my issue right now, coming in new, is the base budget itself. So we're talking about adding all of this other stuff on top of what we already have. And I think there needs to be a lot more understanding of where we are currently with what we have, what's required, why do we have more than what's required, all of the information, have we been adding more, all of those kind of statistics, data, do we have extra money somewhere in the line items, or, so I think that's something that we need to address at some point in these meetings, or, you know, one-on-one meetings or something.
I do have a question about the special ed. It says here impacts the Smithfield High, Middle, and West Side. So we're asking for one teacher for each of those schools? Is that what's for? And
Yes,
one
sir.
IA?
One teacher and one IA would be in an inclusion classroom in each of those buildings.
Okay. And inclusion, could you explain exactly what inclusion
Well,
is?
our expert is here, so I'm going to let her take over. Ms. Magner, our director.
So our inclusion teachers actually work with students who have disabilities in the general education setting.
Closer. Got to go closer. Closer to the microphone.
Our inclusion teachers are our teachers who work with students who have disabilities in the general education setting versus what we would call a self-contained teacher, and that would be a teacher who works with students who have to be, you know, pulled from that general education setting for a variety of reasons, but those are the two types of teachers that we typically...
Okay, I understand that. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So then, conveniently enough, the next slide is self-contained teacher.
Any questions?
Yes. You know, I'm a big advocate for special education.
Yes.
And I would love to see this class in Carsville.
Yes.
So would we, as we stated, Mr. Collock, and I'll just share just so everyone else knows, you know, we have students who are Carsville students, that's their home school. They require services that are a self-contained setting, and there is no self-contained setting in Carsville, so we have to transport those students to other schools. Currently, we have 2, I believe, who are attending Hardy Elementary. So they get on the bus and they are transported to Hardy every day.
And how long is that bus ride for them?
Trish,
I think
long?
about an hour.
Yeah.
About an hour. So there are
each way.
special needs students on the bus for an hour.
Elementary
Yes.
kids.
Elementary.
Yeah.
So that could be very hectic for the teachers when they get to school, and quite hectic for the parents when they get home.
Yes.
And we really do try to
Okay.
keep students in their zone school if possible, but
Right.
unfortunately, we haven't been able to do so for Carsville.
Yes.
Okay.
Is it fair to say that if you implemented this, you could recoup the use of that special ed bus?
I believe it potentially would be helpful because that route would be, we wouldn't have to have that route potentially.
Is
to
it a
go from
special
Carsville.
trip? I guess that's what I'm asking.
I'm sure it is.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah. Well, because we're taking a student who, if we had this program at Carsville, could stay at Carsville. Right now, that student is traveling to Hardy. So I would imagine if we had this classroom, that would help the transportation department with that route.
Would the child still require transportation from home to Carsville?
Yes,
If so,
possibly.
would it be on a gen ed bus or a special needs bus?
That would just depend. You know, students require special transportation, not just because we've placed them in a different school out of their zone, but also because of different communication or
Absolutely.
behavioral needs as well.
Yep.
So that's very student dependent.
So, okay, so that would be the question I would have about transportation.
Right.
Okay.
Next slide is another special education slide, registered behavior techs. Any comments, questions on that?
Are these for a particular school?
Yes.
Where,
So currently, we employ one RBT. Now, an RBT is a registered behavior technician, and they work under the supervision of a board-certified behavior analyst. We currently employ one BCBA and one RBT, and that duo works the entire division, all 9 schools. What we would like to do is we would like to employ 2 additional RBTs and assign one RBT to the 3 teams we currently have out in the building. So right now, the way we divide the 9 schools in our department is we have 3 teams, each responsible for 3 schools, and those teams consist of a special ed coordinator, psychologist, social worker, and then this would be the addition of that behavior technician. So that would add more support at the building level for the kids who we're currently having difficulty with.
And if I can add, this is a request that is coming to us straight from the buildings. Principals, assistant principals, teachers, as you all have heard, and I know you continue to hear, the behavior of students is very, very challenging. And so this person would work directly with the teachers on how to get behavior under control.
So they would have the responsibility of 3 buildings, and allow a lot more attention to those buildings and those students and teachers.
Very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving along here. So before we go any further, maybe I can help echo Ms. Perkins' comments. So we've asked for a handful of new positions. Some of them support instruction, some of them support grant writing, student services, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of people, the public, the county, some members of the board would like to know, of our current budgeted positions, how many of those positions remain unfilled? So let's try to say it so that it makes some kind of sense. I've come to learn over the past, since I've been sitting on this board, that the schools rely heavily on money that comes in. I just call it fluff. I don't think that's an appropriate name, but that's what we'll call it. So if you have a position that someone resigns halfway through the year, so half of that person's salary is recouped for half of the school year. Perhaps a position never gets filled, so you retain that person's salary for the full school year. So we can go back and forth. So there's excess funding within the budget of staffing. I've come to understand that I think the schools rely heavily on that excess funding to offset unexpected costs. Mm-hmm. It goes various places. We do not have a contingency fund for the schools. It doesn't exist. So you don't have any backup plan. Be that as it may, as we come to close this fiscal year, we are going to offset a deficit from the previous fiscal year. So if everything lines up, we will most definitely recoup that part of the deficit and hopefully some excess funds. So we've discussed deferring a handful of things in your presentation. So we've kicked some maintenance requirements down the road. We haven't hired any additional staff. Of all the budgeted positions for the current fiscal year, do we have any that never got filled?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we do.
Okay. If we didn't have them this year, can we argue that we need them next year?
Yes.
Yes, because we've been having our current staff in place. Well, this is for teaching positions, and each one of them are nuanced in each category that I would have to go through. But our teaching staff, we either have had a long-term sub in their spot, or we have been having other staff teach an additional block at the secondary level in order to cover that. At GTMS, for example, we had to dissolve an elective choice. So yes, there are positions that we have not had filled all year that we will need next year.
So in other words, even though we didn't fill them, those duties were still performed in one fashion or another by some person.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
And if I may add, Mr. Chair, fair question. Many of our positions that are vacant now, we receive resignations from teachers who, for whatever reason, are moving or physical health or mental health, are no longer able to perform their duties. We're obligated to have someone in that classroom. And as staff mentioned, those responsibilities do not go away because the person goes away. I think Ms. Getz mentioned the request for special ed IAs. Some of these positions are really difficult to fill. Doesn't mean, again, that the responsibilities and the work isn't getting done because it has to. It's not being done to the extent that we may need it to be done. It may not be done with the fidelity that's expected or required, but someone is filling in those roles. So to say, to your point, is the work getting done? It has to. Could it be done better? Maybe we had someone who was certificated in some of those areas, absolutely. But it's not for a lack of trying in some of these positions. It's just difficult. And education, I think we mentioned earlier, there's a dearth of individuals coming into the field in general. And in some of these very specific areas that requires a specific skill set, it's even more challenging. So again, it doesn't mean that the need goes away when we can't find a body or a person.
And I think in some divisions, like large divisions, you might expect, there's 100 positions that you budgeted for that you're not going to fill. In our division, we had 10 of those positions that were not filled this year. And so even with that, and then on top of that, those 10 teachers means that's 30 extra sections of courses that had to be reallocated and then paid supplemental funds to other teachers to pick those up. And so the amount that you're...
Or substitutes.
Even though that does come out of a separate fund. But overall, you're talking about a very small portion compared to what some other larger school divisions might experience when it comes to extra funds from that.
So, as I recall, when the school year started, like you said, we started 10 teachers short. You offset 3 of those teachers by compressing class sizes, if I recall, and then the rest of those were filled with long-term subs.
Yes, we have a few long-term subs, and then the teachers picking up the extra blocks.
So it's arguable that those potential savings for those 10 positions were spread over covering long-term subs.
Yes, because we know that last year that the substitute budget was not enough to cover our needs. And so even though someone might say, well, substitutes come out of a different account, if there's not enough money there because you have more subs than you have money, that money then has to come from somewhere. And the first place we would draw from would be the budgeted salary and benefits, because that's in fact what it's filling.
And does our line item in the budget that's established for substitutes, is that sufficient to cover those losses? Or how do I say it? Are we budgeting for substitutes to cover positions that didn't get filled, or are we just budgeting substitutes on an estimate of teachers that are sick or out or whatever the case may be? You follow me?
I do. Ms. Harris?
With regards to this fiscal year, we budgeted based on last year's expenses because we know that it hadn't been sufficiently budgeted for in the last couple of years. But moving forward, we will probably want to look at budgeting for expectations and not just based on what has happened in prior year.
Okay.
But I think to answer the chair's question, it is an estimate because we don't know what that's going to be. And if I appreciate the question because you're right, I think some people make assumptions that we're saving lots of money as a result of vacancy savings. Our vacancies relative to the neighboring jurisdictions, vacancies are minimal. So there is really not a lot of savings there for us to have. I know, we certainly won't mention any names, but some of our neighbors are saving millions of dollars as a result of not being able to fill teaching positions. Thankfully, we don't have that problem here in Isle of Wight.
Right. I think we better have the teachers than that savings.
Mr. Chair, I do
Yes,
have
sir.
one more question. We talked about special needs. We're talking about instruction. How is our gifted program faring right now? Is it adequately funded? Do we have the right teachers, enough teachers in place? And how are our students? Do we have the same amount of students as we've had in the past, more or less? How is that program going?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, we changed how we provided gifted services. And so I got to be honest, we've had mixed reviews on how that is going. Our plan is for next fall to do a really in-depth program evaluation of our gifted program. And at that time, I could absolutely see coming to the board next year to ask for additional resources for that program. So it has mixed results right now. In some places, it's going so very well, and others not as well. So
Okay.
we definitely want to look at that, and that is going to be a priority of ours in the fall to do a program evaluation to determine is there a better way that we can be providing services?
Okay, thanks, Mr. Getz. I'd like to talk to you about that some other time once we're
Absolutely.
done with the budget. Thank you.
Let's talk about field trips. Any comments?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
at the risk of ruffling quite a few feathers here, I remember back when I was in school and I went on multiple field trips, and all of the costs for the field trips were paid by my parents. So I'm looking at this, it says since COVID, it's been passed on to parents. You're looking at $100,000 here to cover basic field trip expenses. What we got to keep in mind is everything that we do here has the very, very good potential of increasing taxes overall for everyone within the county. So please explain to me how important it would be to provide those $100,000 for field trips versus passing the cost on to parents, which is the way it was when I was going through the school system.
Mrs. Getz, can I take that?
Sure.
Mr. Worcester, when I was younger, I couldn't go on field trips because my parents couldn't afford it. So it makes a huge difference in many kids' lives. And we didn't have poverty at the same level that we've got in this county. There was just a few families in my town that couldn't afford that. And it was an embarrassment, to be completely honest. I was embarrassed that my parents couldn't afford that. I am a huge advocate that field trips, as long as it's connected to learning, and I think we've got to find the money for it, or maybe find some grants that will help the underprivileged children of our community, which there are plenty, participate in field trips and athletics and the like. So I'd hope we don't go back to saying, well, back in the day we all paid for it, because it's true, we did in two different ways. Your parents paid for it and you went, or you paid for it by not going. Thank you.
And I will say that we do try to cover the cost if we know that a student is, having a hardship and can't afford it. However, many times they don't make it known, and they will just say they don't want to go because, as you said, Mr. Colick, it's embarrassing. So prior to COVID, we had this money. It wasn't for every single a trip that you can imagine, but if it was like fourth grade's going to Jamestown, we did cover the cost of the buses and the drivers. We have seen a significant increase in the cost of drivers and our buses. And so that's largely why the principals asked for this again, is because the cost of transportation has really become problematic, and passing that on to their parents, it is a burden to parents.
If I may add, thank you both for the question. Thank you for your comment, Mr. Colick. As I meet with our student groups, one of the questions, one of their comments was they missed the fact that they have actually missed out on field trips that are connected to learning. And I think to Mrs. Getz's point, if we're saying we'd like all of our particular grade to go to Jamestown, or all this grade goes to a museum, if we're going to set that as an expectation from the school division, I don't think it's fair that we pass that on to the parent if that is a semi, if you will, requirement of the school division. I hear you if there is, a field trip going to a theme park, that one could argue that, but if we're connecting this to learning and making that a requirement, then again, I think it's our responsibility to provide some support to our community, to our families and students.
What's our current budget for field trips?
Zero.
Zero.
The schools don't have a field trip budget right now. Before COVID, we did. It was $100,000 as a division. It was spread out among the schools. But since we returned from COVID, there has not been any money allocated to field trips.
So I asked that deliberately because I know that my children have went on a field trip twice this year. Didn't cost me a penny. So it's coming from somewhere.
The school is paying it from their instructional funds.
Okay.
Just roughly on average, what is the average? I know it's going to vary depending on the type of field trip, but what is the average cost for one field trip? Do the best you can.
I honestly can't say. I mean, it could be $50 to get.
Between point A and point B.
It's really hard to say, Mr. Wooster.
Would you speak to at least what we're paying for, obviously, the driver, admission to wherever, right?
Yeah.
So there's some inherent cost.
Let me get some more information. I'm very hesitant to throw something out there when I don't really know off the top of my head exactly. Let me look at some of the more traditional ones that we typically take.
I think we can probably pull the minutes from last meeting because we had a beta trip. Windsor Elementary went to beta. Smithville High went to beta. So
Sure, we'll reach out and
find
find.
that
Yeah,
easy.
we'll get you some totals. Absolutely.
Participants paid $70.
Yeah.
I wrote a check.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about staff development. Ms. Getz,
Yes, sir.
you have any questions on this? All right. Next slide, number 16. Number 17, Governor's School. It's pretty cut and dry. 18, VPI. Ms. Getz, for VPI,
Sir.
what is our total? So there's a lot going on with VPI, and this is going to tie into your little Sprouts thing, right? That's all?
No.
Is it different?
Yes.
Okay.
VPI is the Virginia Preschool Initiative. We have 5 classrooms that are funded. We get money from the state. We also have to contribute some local funding as well. It is a program based solely on at-risk students. There's a formula. You qualify based on your level of risk.
Okay. And so this increase is due to increase in
Well,
enrollment?
it's not necessarily that. It's the cost of everything is more, and so we have been able to do less trips for those 4-year-olds. And they're not doing, major trips. They're going to the pumpkin patch. They might go to the beach. They might go to a farm. It's things like that. But that is an integral part of the 4-year-old program. And the teachers have, really asked that they would like to get it back to what it was pre-COVID. They were attending approximately 5 field trips a year. They're down to 3 this year.
Okay.
Again, real quick.
Yes.
We're talking about children under the age of 5. I believe it's 3 to 5. 4 to
This
5.
program is just for 4-year-olds.
Just 4. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a little curious because we're looking at 4-year-olds. When it says at-risk preschool students, what exactly is that detailing? Why would they be at risk? That's what I'm getting at.
Yes, so it's a variety of factors. For example, if you're a single-parent home, the level of education of your parents, if your parents have been incarcerated, do you have a disability? It is a variety of factors that we look at. And then from that, you earn certain points, and then that determines your eligibility into a program. And we look at poverty level as well. So they have to submit their income. Like I said, it is need-based, so not any student can qualify.
Okay, thank you.
Vape detectors.
And on that, I would really like our high school principals. They are here, and they are passionate about this, and I would love for them to be able to speak on vape detectors.
And Mr. Brinkley, would you come forward as well, given the research you've done in this area?
So Ms. Carroll and Ms. Cuffey.
Y'all been hiding out back there.
They came especially for, this such thing.
So I don't mind starting. When I heard Mr. Collick speak earlier about concerns with discipline and what are we doing and putting a lot of resources into that, we had a data meeting with Mrs. Getz and Dr. Kale last week, and my discipline is at levels high due to vape suspensions. Over 50% of my suspensions are students with vapes.
I would add to that as well, the same at Windsor High School. Students are typically found using them in the restrooms. The added layer of the SSO has increased, helped us to locate the vapes or find the students using vapes in the bathrooms as they are, just asking to go to the restroom. The vape detectors would help with that, letting us know that somebody is using a product in that area. Right now, it's hit and miss as to where we can find a person using a vape. There's more out there than what we're able to locate. So it's difficult to actually zero in on exactly who has them. It's a growing concern. Parents have shared that it's a growing concern as well. So it's an active conversation daily that we're having with students, and it's become a investigation daily.
And so Mr. Brinkley, I would really love for him to be able to talk to you about how those detectors work, and he's also spoken with other divisions who are currently using them.
So I don't want to go into
Closer. Closer.
So I don't want to go into too much detail regarding exactly how they work and how we would use them. But basically, you have options for it to be an audible alarm. You have the option for it to be a silent alarm that will send a notification. And along with that, it ties right in with our existing security system of Genetech, so we would be able to check times and see who's coming and going from a certain area and allow us the ability to investigate that a lot more. They are being used in Newport currently that I know of, Newport News, Hampton, and Suffolk. And I'm working on gathering some additional statistics for how their referrals have increased, how their discipline has increased, and then just the sheer number of items that they're finding and locating. The reason that this has come about the way it has and has become an area of concern is through the Student Advisory Board. Every meeting that we've had with them, this is something that the students themselves are coming to us and telling us that is a problem, and that it's one of the things that makes them uncomfortable, which would go right along with our climate surveys and everything. But these students are coming and saying that they're uncomfortable going to the restroom because that there are other students in there vaping, and then they're not comfortable going and using our school restrooms for that reason. So that's the main reason that this has come about as being such an issue, is it's coming directly from our students.
If I get caught in the restroom with a vape, what happens?
So you come to my office or one of the AP's office, you write a student statement. It seems kind of matter of fact, or like, excuse the pun, duh, you write, I was caught with, or in my possession I had. The discipline protocol states that students that are found with a vape, which is illegal for anyone 18 years or younger, it's 21, sorry. 21, you can't have it. So number one, you're in possession of an illegal item on school grounds. We do the statement, we check if there are any witnesses, we get witness statements. I make the parent phone call home, letting the parent know that that student has now accrued 5 days out of school suspension. So for every one vape student has, it's 5 days out of school. So a vape offense. So having multiple vape offense per week That's 5 times 5 times 5. So therefore, like I said to you earlier, my discipline has gone up because of students being found in possession of vapes. But one thing now that has increased, we found since we've come back from Christmas break, and I don't know why Christmas break, we're having students enter our building with THC vapes. So that's a whole nother level of a controlled substance in our building, which we're extremely concerned about.
Mr. Brinkley, would you speak to what that is?
THC is the active ingredient that is found in marijuana, which provides your high, obviously. And what they're doing is they've now come up with ways of extracting this out of the plant into oils, things of that nature, and then putting them into the vape pens, so that they're having access to basically marijuana without having the odor of the marijuana and things like that we're used to.
So short story is you got kids going to the restroom, getting high, walking around.
That's right.
Is 5 days enough to suspend them?
That's
Now,
first offense.
That's THC is different. THC is 10 days. So if it's a regular vape pen, it's 5, but if it's a THC vape pen, it's 10 days.
Same question. Is that enough? Like, I got zero tolerance for it.
Well, it's 10 days and a recommendation for alternative school. So if they're getting high, they're going to alternative school.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've got some questions. So first, I want to understand, is our goal here to catch students using vapes?
Our goal is to...
Or would it be to deter students from using vapes?
The latter, of course.
Okay,
to
so we
deter.
want to deter students from using vapes. This vape detector costs us about $75,000. It takes quite a bit of your time, as Cuffy, as you just said, when you catch somebody using a vape. It takes a lot of your time. In fact, $150,000 worth of time if we were to hire somebody to help out. I am a proponent of deterrence, always. Not catching kids in the act, okay? I would propose that we find a way to deter students, not catch them, and not suspend them. And Mr. Marsh and I have had several discussions on the use of dogs in this. And we know the Sheriff's Department does not have dogs that will go ahead and get vapes. But they are available on a civilian side. And they would complement what the sheriff can provide. They can do things under schools authority that the sheriff's office can't do. And they can do things, the sheriff's office can do things that the civilian contractors would not be able to do. And that would cost about, right off the bat, $25,000 less to do that, to bring in, you know, a dog team for each end of the county. I do not want to put anything in the restroom so we can go and catch kids in the act, because there's going to be that one kid. Now, there's probably going to be a dozen kids that at one time during the year make a stupid suggestion, and they go in and they vape, and they screw up the rest of their high school career and potentially college career. So I would like this to be reconsidered, Mr. Brinkley, looked at the dogs that could sniff them out and therefore deter them. Will some kids get caught? Absolutely. Will some notice other kids being caught in the hallways, at the school entrances, in the cafeteria, and just when they're minding their own business and not vaping? Sure. That's where the deterrence comes in. So folks, that's what I'd rather see, because we can use them for more than just one item, more than just vape. So I think this would be money ill spent and would be hurting more kids than we can help. Thank you.
So, Mr. Collick, the possession of a vape
If I may, not to interrupt you, Mayor, Mr. Chair, respond.
Yes, absolutely.
Please, I'm going to ask you to respond, but I'd like to respond. Respectfully, Mr. Collick, I disagree with you. I think the vape detectors would be a deterrence. I think if a student is aware that there is an instrument in our restrooms or in different places, that I think will deter a student. And we can agree to disagree, but that is my response to to this, suggesting that this is not a deterrent. I apologize, Ms. Getz, I just wanted to respond before making that point.
If I could, I would agree that they won't use it in the restroom wherever the vape detectors are located, but they will still use them on school grounds.
I was just going to say the possession of it. So the dogs, and if they catch them, it's still going to be a suspension. So even if you possess them, I just want to be clear, it's not just the use.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's
possession.
what I was trying to say. There'll be a few kids that are caught, but it will deter other students from bringing them into school, okay, over a short period of time.
And you know, weapons detections,
Yeah.
that is another thing that can also catch the vapes and prevent and deter them from bringing them in if we had weapons detection systems as well. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yep.
I don't think it's
And that's all
either
static.
or. I think it's a variety of things.
Well,
and
that
Mr.
goes
Brinkley
back
can-
to the 7 levels of security.
Yeah, yes.
Question, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Would E-Pass help prevent some of this in any way? The electronic hall passes? Has anybody looked into any of those?
Like
at
an
all?
E-Pass, we use E-Pass in some of our schools. So yes, I mean, I guess it can help determine, but our cameras do the same thing as far as who's going into the restrooms. But the fact of the matter is that the students know they can go in there and they can get away with vaping, because it's the chance of an adult walking in there just at that time that you're vaping, or for other students to report that you're vaping. If there was something in the restroom that you knew was going to set off an alarm, hopefully you would think twice before vaping.
I've got one quick question. This is going to be for Mr. Brinkley. With vaping and THC being illegal for under 21, as you stated, what legal ramifications would be in effect in addition to the suspension from school? Or would there be any legal ramifications?
There would be legal ramifications for it. Generally, when it's THC, or if there's say a marijuana cigarette or something like that, that is then referred to the SRO in the school, and then the SRO will then take that to juvenile intake to see how they want to proceed with it. And the majority of the time, especially if it's a first offense, it's gonna go through that system. It's gonna go through what they call the diversion program. So versus that student having, you know, having things on their record, they will generally take it under advisement for a period of time to see if they have any other issues, if they have any more occurrences of that. And then at that point, after a certain period, basically like a juvenile probation almost, after a certain period of time, then they do away with that charge. But generally it's presented to the juvenile court services to see how they want to proceed with it.
Okay, so just hypothetically speaking here, let's say you had a 16, 17-year-old. Now this is their third time being caught. What would happen legally at that point?
It's difficult for me to say, because ultimately that comes down to the decision of a judge in juvenile court. So I wouldn't be able to say what would happen in that situation. But there's any number of options through juvenile court services to provide services for that student, and that's ultimately the goal through the juvenile court services, is to provide services to those juveniles versus having them housed in juvenile detention, anything like that. So it's difficult for me to say what would happen, say, after a third offense, because it would ultimately still be up to the judge.
Okay, thank you. That's all I've got.
Much to discuss. Just for the sake of getting it off my chest, it's not the first time I've heard from someone say that students don't want to go to the restroom because of what other kids are doing in the restroom. I've had a parent call me up not that long ago and ask me, imagine if you went to work tomorrow and you were afraid to go to the break room because someone was going to have a fight. They were prone to having a fight. Imagine not wanting to go use the restroom because when you walked in the restroom, some of your peers that worked with you were in there doing stuff that you knew were in violation to the rooms. In the very near future, I'm going to have a little girl who's going to be going to Windsor High School. And if she comes home and tells me that she's afraid to go to the restroom because she doesn't want to get in trouble because some punks are in there smoking THC, Dad's going to have a problem with it, and I'll be beating on Miss Carol's front door. So
That's the reality, Mr. Marsh. That is
I
the reality.
I agree with you. And Mr. Collick, I don't have any issue with the canines, but I'm very unsympathetic for a adolescent that deliberately breaks the rules because he or she knows that they can.
And I don't disagree with you. I would prefer to deter them from even breaking the rules.
I would say that this is a deterrent as much as any dog. Either way, we got stuff to discuss. For the sake of time, I propose we move forward.
Let's move on.
Budget for secondary schools, slide 21. Athletics. No comments. Slide 22, athletic equipment.
No, sorry.
Okay. You ready? Okay. 23, Windsor High School athletic purchases. On a positive note, ladies, I think most of the board would agree that your athletics departments have been neglected in years past.
Right.
24, Windsor High School again. '25, Windsor High School. Yes, sir.
All right, just one question, as far as the athletic funding. I have no issue with the amounts involved. I'm just curious, will all of the funding be distributed equally amongst the athletic programs? Because I know in the past, the baseball team has not been funded. Is that going to change on this go-around?
So I'll let Ms. Cuffey, if she wants to handle that, but the money is given in a lump sum to athletics, and then they would decide on a rotational basis how to fund, like, equipment replacement, uniforms, and so forth. And if you want to add anything to that.
And Ms. Getz nailed it right away. It's a rotation, and I'll give you an example. Girls volleyball, it was their turn to get new uniforms this year, so they got their new uniforms last year. It was girls soccer. Could it be baseball in the spring? It could be, but we don't have the money to give every single team every other year new uniforms, so it's on a 3-year rotation basis for uniforms. But something like helmets, or be it baseballs or a backstop, that's urgent and that's needed like immediately. So things that are needed immediately, those do get dispersed to those athletic teams, but uniforms are on a rotation for us.
That's the same for Windsor High.
Okay, I will rephrase my question. Actually, I'll ask another question first. Dr. Coleman, when was the last time the Smithfield High School baseball team was funded?
Now, I already know the situation that you're speaking of, so we're talking about two different items here. We're talking about funding, as Ms. Cuffey was pointing out, and we're talking about the field services and the maintenance that was required for that team. Now, if we're speaking on that, then it was a 5-year time period where the baseball team wasn't actually, not speaking of funding, but wasn't taken care of, if you want to put it like that, when it comes to the field maintenance and the different things that other teams had got.
Right, I'm speaking specifically to uniforms, helmet, equipment, things of that nature, not necessarily the condition of the field itself.
The conversations that I had was based off of this year, and I think that's when me and you came together to focus on some things. I turned everything over to pretty much to Coach Doolin and then back over to Ms. Cuffey. So at this present time, I'm not aware of any non-funding items as it comes to, once again, financials. It is some items that we're working through when it comes to physical baseball bats, different things of that nature, and once again, fields, but not with financials.
And as far as their uniforms, they were on last year's rotation, so they did get new uniforms last year. Every year they are allotted X number of balls. Every year they are allotted, like if you say rakes and sand and cat litter for the wet areas. So in art class, you would say disposables. Baseballs are disposable. Thank you. Consumables, they get those annually, but specifically on the uniform rotation, they were in last year's rotation.
And
Okay. I just want to make sure each one is funded equally.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. And I do want to point out, at this time, the baseball team is in the actual contractual services. Wasn't
Okay.
before.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so all the increases that I've seen, I'm 100% aligned. You need them. Then we see the one-time payment or one-time deposit for the athletic supplies. I see that, and this is more semantic than anything else, Dr. Kramer. I'd like to see all the one-time things listed separately, not within the budget itself, because next year we're not going to be asking for that. But again, support that 100%.
Totally agree with you, Mr. Colick, and we will actually provide that. Actually, even in one of the slides, I shared all of, at least the primary one-time request in one slide,
Okay.
and we'll give you absolutely that information
And
moving forward.
just to add to that just slightly, in addition to the one-time outlay, there are plenty of things there that should fall under capital improvement, and I think we need to capture that separately as well. And my calculation, not including replacing West Side School, comes up to around $17.8 million is things that we really need in capital improvement.
And Mr. Chair, if I can just comment on that for the listening public, there's some really big items in there. The Carrollton HVAC, I think, is somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 million.
Yep.
7 point.
So we're looking at buses that we're in need to catch up, given that we haven't purchased buses in the past several years. That's a few $1 million. So there's some really big ticket
Huge,
items.
yes.
Right. So I
Absolutely.
wanted to state that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. CTE, slide 27.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Okay, looking at this increased CTE funding by $73,914. This is for the cost of materials to inflation, looking at, the criminal justice program. My concern, and this will come up with another slide as well, my concern with this, and this is going to be one of the rare occasions where I say, is not enough. With the CTE programs, we've got equipment that is aging. Some types of equipment are at their life expectancy. They need to be either replaced or repaired. We've got some areas where you have annual inspections, and the 73,914, is that really going to be enough to cover these things?
Can you hear me? Okay. The 73,914 is in addition to restoring funding from the 21-22 school year. So it's
Right.
actually a substantial increase over our current allotment. And it is intended, I recognize that we can't replace all equipment at one time, but CTE equipment is very expensive. And we do need to put in place serious maintenance and routine replacement of those things.
Yeah.
So that's going to put a significant dent in it, but absolutely, if you're looking at allocating more, I'm not going to argue with you.
I'm fully aware of the 73,914 would be the increase to it. Again, this is a rare occasion. I would recommend that be a 100,000 increase.
And we could certainly use that. I mean, our welding machines, as you know, you were there on Saturday, our welding machines are certainly reaching their lifespan. It's going to cost about $109,000 to replace them in one classroom. And that's just an example. There are materials and equipment across all of our departments that are in desperate need, that are reaching that final lifespan. CNC machines, laser cutters, those things have about a 5-year turnaround. So every 5 years or so, you have to get on a replacement schedule for those things. My intent was to try to capture some of that, even if we can't get it all.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, Mr.
Yes,
Chair,
sir.
I think to Chair Vice Chair Wooster's point, I think it might be helpful for the board and the community, Dr. Kale, to maybe get a full account of what the needs are in totality. I think we're being very practical in terms of our ask, but it might be helpful if we were to find out what would the extent of the needs be if we were to chronicle all of the needs in our CTE programs. So very expensive commercial equipment that we're using, how many are down, how many needs repairing, replacing, I think to capture that in its totality might be very helpful for the board and the community, I think, to Vice Chair Wooster's point.
We can certainly gather all of that information and prioritize it in order of what needs to be replaced next, if that would be helpful.
That would be great.
Okay, slide 28, CNC machine. We good with that?
How badly is a CNC needed?
So we don't have one at all for our building trades department. It is part of the new industry standard for building trades, both for commercial and for residential. When we find employers, that's what they are using to make designs and to cut things and be very precise. We don't have one. They are expensive. So it's something that I think our students could really benefit from, particularly as we begin to expand that building trades program. It would still probably be nice to have, but definitely something our students would greatly benefit from having.
And how often would the machine itself be turned on and used?
I would expect Mr. Rogers to turn it on pretty much daily.
Daily? Okay. No, that's an important question because no, my brother recently purchased an industrial CNC and for about half that price. That's why I asked.
Oh, love to know his supplier.
I'll get it for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to ask myself where the 70,000 came from. Reason being, I was looking at a CNC machine for myself, which is a full size, and you can pick that up for about 10,000, 10 to 12,000. That includes the CAD software, the control box, the screens, everything.
Yeah, just bear in mind that sometimes when we're looking at what is a personal user component versus an industrial user component, the price tends to go up based on the amount of wear and tear you would expect a machine to be able to take over its lifespan.
Right. I'll get you the information on the one I looked at. It's not industrial, but it is just about industrial, and it's a whole lot cheaper too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So that's all I've got.
Mm-hmm.
Slide 29, CTE capital outlay. Greenhouse. Didn't we just put in a greenhouse?
No,
The
we
second
have
one?
not installed a new greenhouse at this point. We have one, the one large. This is for a large greenhouse that would go beside the one that you've seen when you've been there in recent times. So this would be another one that is equal in capacity and size. So it's a very large greenhouse. But it would double their capacity for growing. I mean, right now they have 4, maybe 5 rows, beds in there total. It does limit what they can do in terms of growing and giving students experience with different types of growth, different climate conditions, different nutrients, soils, things like that.
Moving right along. Slide 31, CSEP. Just for the listening audience, I understand that that's a tentative projection until CSEP actually finalizes their budget.
Yeah, that's correct. You know, they're going through their same budget process as we are, but we're anticipating that increase.
Okay. And that's Isle of Wight's fair share of the total CSEP.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mr. Chair, if I may add, just wanted to state, we have a board member for CSEP here. So Mr. Colick is our representative with board member Perkins as the alternate, and they will actually have to vote on the CSEP budget. So just for the general public to let them know what that entails.
And we will make every attempt to keep that as low as possible.
Putting you on the spot there, Mr. Colick. You see what just happened? It's a rare opportunity for the Dr. Kramer to turn it around. All right. Slide. Anybody need to take a break? Yeah, okay, let's take 10. All right, we're back in session. So, for the group here, for the sake of time, and there's a lot of information, I'll make a suggestion. Either A, we entertain a few more minutes and give everybody a chance to ask any burning, pressing questions, or we just take a recess and we'll set another date. We'll schedule and figure another date in the near term to come back. What are we saying here?
Mr. Chair, I recommend we finish the current section we are in and pick up with human resources at a separate meeting date. Human resources request.
Anybody else have an issue with that? We had one more.
I've got no problem with that, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Perkins?
I don't care either way.
Okay. So let's wrap up slide 33. You got something for that, Mr. Rooster?
Do not.
Well, I guess that wraps us up. So we're roughly halfway through the quad slides. The lion's share of that information is on the quad slides. So my ask of the board is that we'll schedule another date. We'll get with the clerk and we'll figure out a next time, sooner than later, to come back and come through this again. But in the meantime, I would ask that everybody go through the slides and come up with their own list of. We know we're not going to get all this stuff. We know that's a reality. So we're going to have to trim some stuff off. So if we could all take some time and come up with our own list of things that you would support hanging on to and things that you could defer, I think that's time well spent. And then the next time we meet, we can mash those numbers together. Unless anybody has any ideas.
No, I think that's more than appropriate, and if the staff could prioritize theirs as well, I think that would be very beneficial to us up here as we're walking through that, and then we finish these up next week for this iteration. But just for the clerk, when Mr. Marsh is talking to you, I will be available any night next week, preferably not Thursday, but I will be available if needed. And I definitely will not be available Friday.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, for
Yes, sir.
clarity, if I may ask, so, and certainly we will comply with whatever the recommendations or the expectations of the board might be. So you're asking, the board is looking at a date prior to the March 7th date, which is the date that we put on the calendar, and that's okay. I just want to be clear.
We've got March 7th. That's already set. We scheduled March 7th at 6 p.m. to accommodate Mr. Cunningham, so he
Yes,
could
sir.
make it. I understand Mr. Wooster may not make that one. May or may not. Mr. Collick, forget what the resolve was on March 7th.
I will be on video on March 7th.
So my schedule's going to get real tough next week. And I'm not going to commit to anything next week tonight. I would do each, help me out here, Doc Kramer. Are the one-time purchases, are they identified clearly on the slides? The capital?
I don't
Yes.
think they're identified in the quad charts as one time. We actually have extracted those in different places. So we will provide that for you, certainly prior to whenever we meet again. But yes, and again, I pulled those and had those in my presentation without the numbers. But yes, we have pulled out the one-time cost so that you can see what those are. I think to Mr. Collick's point earlier, I think it's important that we see what the one-time costs are and then what are the recurring ongoing costs. So absolutely, we do have those, and we'll make sure that those are provided to the board and to the community.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, just kind of throwing snowballs here. Next Thursday, February 29th, would that be a good date to pick up?
think Mr. Colick said that was the one night he could do it, but it'd be the toughest one.
It'd be the worst night possible for me.
What I'm looking at is the 27th, 28th, and 29th as possibilities for me.
I can do any of those. Like I said, the 29th is the last resort, though.
Okay, I just threw that out there
Yeah,
because it's a
no,
Thursday.
And if that's the best one for everyone, I will come. I have to be at the hospital the next morning very, very early.
Again, I'm not going to commit to nothing tonight. I've got,
All right.
got personal stuff going on next week that's going to get tricky for me.
May I make a recommendation?
I'm all ears. There's nothing easy about any of this.
Would the following, we have the 7th, that doesn't work for Mr. Colick. I was wondering, could we do a date prior to the 7th if next week is too difficult?
That's it.
and
There's only 1 week before the 7th.
It's most appropriate to, when you recess a meeting overnight, it's most appropriate to come back at the earliest possible opportunity. So over a week is really pushing it.
We'll have to coordinate through the clerk.
Absolutely.
I cannot commit tonight.
She knows my dates.
Sure.
She knows Mr. Worcester's dates. You know.
And I want to give Mr. Cunningham a chop at it as well.
Absolutely.
He hasn't seen his stuff. In the interim, I would encourage everybody to look at it, kind of come up with their own prioritization so that we can make some constructive decisions moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will take a look at everything that Dr. Kell has provided and everything that I'm getting Ms. Sullivan. And if I have some time, Ms. Getz, I will stop in your office.
And so just kind of looking down the road, and I know it's coming, so Mrs. Perkins alluded to it. What would be very helpful in the near future would be some numbers. If we could separate the capital, the one-time request, year-to-year comparison, what are we looking for an overall percentage increase? How's that compared to our current inflation rates, so on and so forth?
Absolutely.
Give us an idea of what we're looking for, a percentage of increase from year to year.
Absolutely. Additionally, staff and I are going to be available for whether it's one-on-one, two-to-one, prior to the next formal meeting. So if there are some burning questions that you might have, some thoughts, concerns, what have you, we are available. We understand the season. We're going to make ourselves available for the board. So you don't have to wait until another meeting to have access to us to respond to your thoughts, questions, or concerns.
The availability of you and your staff has been much appreciated.
Thank you for that.
Okay, any other thoughts?
No, I plan on taking advantage of that invitation, Dr. Kramer, so I will see you next week.
Before are we going to have this posted on the agenda so that, how do we make sure that the public can see this?
Yes, we'll make certain to.
Are you talking about the next meeting, putting it on the agenda for then, or?
What's the most appropriate way to make
Legally,
the public can see this?
needs to be on tonight.
I can add it on tonight.
Yeah.
I can do it while we're still in session.
Okay, let's do that. That way, either way, we've got a hearing coming up. We're soliciting input, so give anybody who's watching and interested a chance to check it out as well. Okay, I guess that's it. Thanks, everybody.